I've been thinking a lot about The Last Airbender, just as a franchise, and how unique it was as a show, specifically with its cultural influences. And not only did they nail the feel and aspect of the cultures they were trying to imitate, but they did it right, and they made sure they did their research and that they did everything respectfully. Avatar's always had this feeling of a mystical world that's not so different from our own, and I think that has to do with how much research they put into the show to make sure that everything was a little bit grounded. I mean, yeah, we don't have combination animals or magical elements, but every single aspect of the show is rooted in something that either already exists or existed at some point, relying on folklore and stories and religion to create a lore and mythos that's really truly impressive. I find this part of Avatar so interesting, and I wanted to look through it and try to pinpoint all of the inspirations and all of the research that they did to try to make a little more sense out of this incredible world that they created. Now, I'm not an expert on culture by any stretch of the word, and there's been other people that have made videos very similar to this. All of the information that I got in this video is just from doing research on the internet and watching other amazing content creators cover it themselves. That's why I implore you, if you're interested by this topic too, dive deep, dig in, and just try to research as much as you can, because honestly, this taught me a lot. This is just sort of my own take on the subject, and I try to cover both Avatar and Korra, which is something I didn't see a lot before. And with Avatar, there's so much to unpack, I feel like there's a lot that hasn't been said yet. So guys, without further ado, let's talk about the cultural inspirations behind Avatar. Got a whole intro without a joke, Retro Nemo? What do you do? What is this, a video essay? Get over yourself. Alright, so let's get this cat out of the bag. Is that an expression? Everybody knows that Avatar is inspired by Asian and Eastern cultures, okay? People think it's an anime. It's obviously influenced by anime, but that's not what this video is about. But yes, it would be dumb to say that Avatar is not based off of Asian culture, okay? Down to how they dress, their names, the amount of tea that they drink, the types of tea that they drink, and the fact that they literally write in Chinese throughout the whole series, which kind of makes it confusing. Like, is this real world language in this mythical land of the four nations? What is happening? Does China exist here? Did they just adopt that language? You'd think that one of these four nations would come up with their own writing, but I don't know, whatever. Just don't think about it. Oh, and they use chopsticks. I mean, they freaking use chopsticks, you guys. But if you just boil Avatar down to it's Asian, it's like an anime, then you're missing the amount of insane research that they put into this show, just on the tribes alone. For instance, the Water Tribe is based heavily off of Inuit culture. That's not surprising. They literally look like the North and South Pole, not very slick, but they live in igloos, they fish for food. Even their dress is extremely similar to Inuit culture and Inuit dress, wearing heavy furs and animal skin as protection against the cold, which is something that they did. But it also has some aspects of Native American culture as well. The war paint they wear in battle can be attributed to the Native American cultures, along with the spiritual practices of the Water Tribes, even down to Sokka's boomerang. But in that same sense, the boomerang can also be attributed to South Asian cultures or Aboriginal Australians. Then you have the Southern Water Tribe, which has canals that are very reminiscent of Venice's gondola and canal systems, but it also resembles ancient Aztec capitals. It's just a smorgasbord of cultures, and they're really pulling the best of everything to create something that looks unique, but again, very grounded. It doesn't look that weird, it doesn't look that fantasy, it just kind of looks like our world a little bit. Then you have the Earth Kingdom, which is very, very bluntly based off of Chinese cultures, down to the hair knot hairstyles a lot of them wear, the similar Chinese architecture. Ba Sing Se is literally built with a giant wall around it, which might also be America, maybe, we don't know. Oh, and that dumb emperor who got overthrown shares a not so striking resemblance to the actual last emperor of China, Puyi, who was also basically a puppet leader and had no real power and was kind of dorky. But then you take the Fire Nation. Now, a lot of people compare the Fire Nation to Japan, and I can totally see that, especially imperialist Japan, which was an era of their time where they were really, really focused on expanding and domination, which sounds kind of familiar to our story. And their attacks during the 100-Year War are very similar to how Japan actually fought in World War II, mainly with a lot of surprise attacks, even down to the school censorship that the Fire Nation experiences, similar to some of the censorship that actual Japan has about the previous wars. But I was surprised to learn that geographically, the Fire Nation itself was based off of Iceland. Kind of ironic, right? Considering the names. It was actually used as the reference model for the Fire Nation, as well as Hawaii and of course Japan. The Air Nation, I think though, is the most interesting. They're based heavily on Tibet, and specifically the Tibetan monks. If you want to get into specifics, Avatar is actually a Hindu word and concept, which is essentially a god being sent down to the humans to help the humans, which is basically who Aang was and also who Obama currently is. But if we're talking about inspirations, we gotta be honest about the Avatar, who is literally just the Dalai Lama. If you compare them side by side, these two people are incredibly similar. The idea of the Dalai Lama is somebody who is constantly reincarnated. His purpose is to travel around the earth, teaching and spreading love and compassion. When he dies, there is a hunt and a group of people who search for the next Dalai Lama, where he is chosen by them and just raised to be the Dalai Lama. And how do they test him? By giving him the objects of previous Dalai Lamas, which is quite quite literally how they find the avatar, by giving the objects of previous avatars. The avatar is real. He's a Dalai Lama. He's alive right now and he has a Twitter account and he's really dope. They won't let him back in his country, but I guess Aang didn't really have a country to go back to, so boom, another similarity. I'm so sorry. But as you can see, these 4 nations are a mix of a bunch of different cultures, okay? It's a melting pot, truly. A lot of people give Avatar credit for the various fighting styles, and I do too. Oh my god, they went try hard here. This franchise is only partially action. There's so much more to it. But the amount of time and dedication they took to perfecting the action and just making it realistic, you think that it would just entirely be an action show, but nope, they just put 110% into everything. They made sure that each type of bending was based off of a different real-life fighting style, and the fact that they made the different types of bending different actual movements, it's such a huge part of what makes this show feel more realistic. Like if everybody moved the exact same, the only difference was the element they were moving, it would feel sort of shallow and not that fun to watch. But instead we have water bending, which is based off of Tai Chi, earth bending, which is based off of a Hungar style of Kung Fu. Toph specifically is based off of Chuka, a southern praying mantis Kung Fu that is actually extremely rare, and they had to get this one guy in who knew it to like kind of teach them. Firebending is more similar to the northern Shaolin styles of Kung Fu, while airbending attributes its movements to a Bagua Zhang style of martial arts. God, I hope I'm saying all of this right. The music for the show uses a wide variety of real cultural instruments. There ain't no MIDI files on this show, okay? They got real sitars and weird ass instruments in that studio. One of the biggest inspirations and one of the first ideas that ever kicked off Avatar as a concept was the image of just giant metal battleships in the Arctic. And that's based off of the incredible real life story of Ernest Shackleton and his expedition to the Arctic. This actually happened. Him and his men took a giant ship trying to explore the Arctic and ended up getting stuck in ice. And they were stranded there for over 500 days. They survived by living on the boat, using each other's morale to kind of like stay alive through those trying times. It's a really interesting story, and I again recommend you to look into it yourself. But this just shows how much of this incredible world is grounded in reality. The 4 elements actually find their roots in Hinduism and Buddhism. The Chinese version isn't as cool though, with water, metal, earth, fire, and wood. These 4 nations are just an incredible, unique, and interesting combination of all these different societies and cultures to create a truly magical world that's a little like our own. The Legend of Korra, on the other hand, is a different story. While The Last Airbender takes heavily from Eastern and Asian cultures, Korra seems to be more on the Western side, modeling itself strangely enough after early America. Korra's whole world feels a lot like our own world after the Second World War. The United Republic of Nations feels a lot like the actual real-life United Nations. One is the 4 nations coming together to sit at a council to make sure a war like the 100-Year War never happens again, and the other is a collection of real-life nations coming together to make sure World War never happens again. Republic City very shamelessly roots itself in early 1920s era New York City. The giant Aang statue gives off serious Statue of Liberty vibes. A lot of the architecture in the city, the way people talk and dress, the types of technology that are available, it's all very 1920s early America. It's also kind of steampunk, but that never happened, so I can't talk about that in this video. The Agni Kai Triad is a gang in Republic City, which is based very heavily off of 1920s mobsters, mainly like the Mafia, or dare I say even like the Yakuza. You even have these hokey 1920s recaps at the beginning of every episode. The entire series does feel very Western. There's all these technological evolutions, capitalism seems to be on the rise, there's all sorts of companies coming out of nowhere. The show starts to adopt a lot of Western politics. We see all these presidential characters rise up, and the death of many monarchies, like the Earth Queen, except in that case, like a literal death. Sorry, Earth Queen. Even bending gets hit by the capitalism stick, with professional bending being this entire industry, which models itself very heavily off of professional sports. Where in Avatar, you'd see people using bending to maybe move a boat or an airship. In Korra, you see them using it for more shallow ways to make money. Then you have movers, which are quite literally movies. I guess this is their chance to poke fun at early cinema. Bolin's famous character, Natak, Hero of the South, is extremely similar to Nanook of the North, a silent film documentary and one of the first, if not the first of its kind, where documentary filmmakers filmed Inuit cultures. It was very inaccurate, but people loved it, and it was a massive success. And the comparison here is pretty obvious. Then there's all the promotional images and propaganda of him punching Unalaq, which is very similar to propaganda during that time, of people like Captain America punching Hitler. The fact that he was even in propaganda cartoons calls back to an era when Walt Disney himself was throwing himself at war efforts, making propaganda cartoons against Hitler and Nazi Germany. So we got that famous Donald Duck one. Yes, capitalism is alive and well in Republic City, which is perfect for Amon because he's literally communist. His whole message of bringing equality to the world, making sure everybody's equal, naming his movement and his people the Equalists, just screams communism, where their whole goal was creating equality financially, no social class or anything. If you think of it, benders are sort of like a social class, so Amon literally wanted to tear down social class. He's a communist, homie. I mean, he looks super dope and scary and intimidating, but you know, he's just a communist. He's kind of a joke now. Also, he has all that weird propaganda that's kind of Stalin-esque. In fact, all of the major villains in Legend of Korra are rooted in some sort of ideology. Unalaq's weird spirituality puts him in the category of like a radical religion religious reformer. He's just a textbook religious extremist. Except Avatar doesn't have a religion, so I guess he's just into spirits. Zahir is literally an anarchist. I mean, he's self-proclaimed. He's so dumb, but he's got such a defined jawline that it kind of makes up for it. His whole ideology is rooted in tearing down all forms of authority, so I guess, I don't know, the world can just be free of rulers, but also really dangerous, and there's no legal drinking age. I don't really understand anarchism. Oh, and then there's Kriva. She's just fascism. She's not that interesting. Again, with the jawline, though, man, these villains really work out. It is interesting to see villains with realistic motivations, except for Zahir. I don't know why he wanted to be an anarchist, but that's okay. Having all of these villains be rooted in real-world villainy, if you want to put it that way, makes them all more realistic and grounded, and in a way, a lot scarier. Imagine if Amon just wanted to destroy Bending because he was a dick. That wouldn't be nearly as scary as his actual reasoning, which kind of makes sense a little bit if he wasn't doing it the way he did, and also is still wrong. It's like Thanos. Like, yeah, you don't want to kill half the universe, but wouldn't it be a little better? Wouldn't it though? People give Korra a lot of flack, especially for its villains, but I give it kudos here. I don't see a lot of shows that try to make their villains this realistic. It made Korra's threats feel real, and in turn, a lot scarier. Season 2 got kind of goofy though, I'm not gonna lie. The Avatar franchise stands out because of its incredible dedication to researching and respecting the cultures that it imitates and puts in the show. I can't name another fictional world that feels like the Four Nations, because there is none. This weird mesh of our world and theirs creates a place that's really special, a place that I not only would want to go to, but in a way feel like I can. And that's just one more reason to love Avatar. God, I hope I didn't mispronounce anything in this video. But as always, I want to know what you guys think about all of this. Do you think the cultures are interesting? Do you not? Let us know in those comments down below. If you want to consider helping out the Roundtable, you can become a member of the channel or help support us on Patreon and get exclusive access to scripts and, that's right, avatars. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content, guys. I'm Nemo, this is a cartoon culture video, and I'll see you next time. Peace.